The land lies quiet now. The freezing thawing of the season has already begun breaking down the plowed clods, readying the soils for next planting season. And this is the season families gather to reflect on the past year and to plan for the next.
It looked like most of the corn was going to wind up as silage, but we wound up with the best crop that we've had, and we've been here for 8 years now. And it's got to be our best harvest in the time that we've been here.
Even though we had an uneven stand of corn and beans and everything early in the season, it all turned out a lot better than anybody expected.
1980 was a year of doubt for farmer Warren Krause, but this holiday season he feels very fortunate.
We as a whole family can be thankful that we were brought up with a belief in God, and that and the stability of the family, and just the general atmosphere that we were brought up doesn't breed some of the unhappiness and turmoil that we see around us every day. And that's one thing that I'm thankful for every day.
Spring isn't spring for farmers. It's planting time. And this planting time was wonderful. You see, this is the first time in Warren Krause's 20 years of farming that he didn't lose time to range. He was out in the field every day. He and sometimes his son Charles would run the plowing tractor. Planting for the Krauses is a two-part operation. First, Charles prepares the soil with the field cultivator and applies weed killer to it from tractor-mounted tanks. Then Warren Krause actually plants the seeds, and this year there was no rain to slow them up. This year the thing that caused the frustration was not the planting weather, but the before planting economy. President Carter had tightened credit in another effort to slow down inflation. One result was that country banks ran out of lending money, and farmers like Warren Krause had to go hunting for operating loans. This seed was being planted with money from the Production Credit Association. And this seed planting operation was costing more than the current price of corn. Farmer Krause figured it was costing him about $2.50 per harvested bushel to plant this crop, and spring corn prices were 10 cents less than that.
I looked to lose money on this year's crop. I looked at that I won't be able to maybe pay back my complete operating loan this fall.
Despite the economic uncertainties at planting time, Warren Krause won this year's race to beat the rains. He won it hands down. But the race to finish planting was not without its casualties. Farmer Krause was getting back into the dairy business, and one of his heifers was down. The veterinarian figured this heifer had swallowed some metal somewhere, maybe a nail that had fallen from a fence or something. Perhaps that had caused the infection and pneumonia.
You can hear the rattle or the crackly noise, which is means there's fluid in the lungs. And
so the doctor stuck a tube through the cow's stomach wall to release the gas that was hurting her. Then he treated her with antibiotics to try to kill the infection. But the treatment came too late. The heifer was not going to make it. Now, it's not uncommon for a farmer to lose a couple of animals to disease every year, but Farmer Krause was upset because he should have noticed this sick cow earlier.
You kind of blame yourself. I mean, this animal, I've been so busy in the field that I haven't been watching them quite as closely as I should have. Possibly, you know, just like a person when they get sick, if you leave it go a couple of days too long, it's many times much harder to lick the situation. And
But a farmer has to move on. There's a multi-million-dollar business that runs only because of him, and he's got to keep it going. In this case, by picking rock. Now, you might think picking up rocks out of a field isn't something a businessman would do, but it is important. You see, every time a plow is run across these fields, more rocks get turned up. Now, should those rocks break a $250 plow trip standard, it'd mean time lost to fixing. But should the rock break an $80,000 combine during the peak harvest season, it could mean the difference between profit and loss for the year.
I don't mind it for the first hour or so, but when you know that it's so unproductive, I mean, it's just a task that has to be done. You don't make any money at all picking rock.
But he does it just the same because he avoids losing money in equipment breakdowns later in the season. There was still no rain to amount to anything, and since it was already June 2nd, Farmer Krause was getting concerned. There had been rains, to be sure, but the rains had brought just enough moisture to cause some seeds to germinate, then die for lack of moisture.
This is the first year that in the 20-odd years that we farmed that I've ever replanted a field.
But the weeds weren't suffering like the crops were, and the herbicide wasn't working because it needed moisture to kill the weeds. And Farmer Krause didn't have time to cut weeds with the field cultivator. He had to make hay, so the weeds grew. Now, on a farm, before you can use a piece of equipment, most of the time you have to fix it. On the hay swather, it was the muffler clamp bolt and grease. This was the toughest part of the whole job of cutting hay, greasing the machine.
Sometimes I'd like to shoot the guys that design where they put the stuff on these machines. It's about impossible to get in.
But eventually, Warren Krause got at them all, and from there on, the job was one of the easier ones on the farm. Just drive along as the machine cuts the alfalfa and crushes the stems so they'll dry faster. But the windrows of hay coming out the back of the machine weren't any too big this year. Too little rain.
I would say we're probably going to get about a half of the normal first crop this year. It's thin, and the dandelions are prolific in the older stands.
And as Farmer Krause drove the swather through the alfalfa, he could look at some of his other crops that, too, were still suffering. Some had died. Most were getting just enough moisture to barely hang on.
The crop will get started now, but if we don't get more rain within a week or so, we'll be right back where we were before. I'm still optimistic on this year. It started out dry, but it started out dry other years, and if we can get some favorable moisture every week or so through the summer, we'll still come out in pretty good shape, I'm sure.
Rain did come in June. The month was to be a wet one. thirsty soil soaked up the water like a sponge. Even during a rainstorm, you could almost see the crops grow. The rains marked the end of a long, uncertain wait for Farmer Krause. Now he was ready for summer.
You always think ahead till 4th of July when you hope the corn is up to your shoulders, and then when the 4th of July comes and you're walking through the field, you're thinking about come the 1st of October when you start harvesting that corn, that you're only going to be able to get 2/3 of the way through the field and the combine bin is full.
And while the corn wasn't quite shoulder high by July 4th, it was surely chest high. And not too many years ago, a good farmer had to be happy with knee high by the 4th of July. The Krauses had their Independence Day picnic at home this year. Their good old American 4th of July meal, hot dogs and steak. Now, the Krauses avoided the political speeches at the organized Independence Day celebration, but they certainly had political thoughts of their own.
Is the price of corn going up with this dumb government grain embargo to Russia? It's just gone to the pits as far as farm grain prices, and that's important for us right now.
We've seen what the present administration has done in the last 4 years, and we hope that we can do better. Any farm policy be better than the farm policy we had in the last few months.
But this was not the day to act on political thoughts. That would come later in the year. This was a day to celebrate and to play with a new tool. They said they purchased it to speed the trip to and from the fields. This tool makes the trip a whole lot more fun, too. Shortly after Independence Day, things began to dry up again. Fewer rains came and lighter except for the hail. Warren Krause had one 20-acre field pelted with hailstones the size of golf balls. They dug holes 2 or 3 inches deep into the soil, and they stripped the leaves of the crops to ribbons and bruised the stalks, laid them open to insects and infections. But again, Farmer Krause was lucky. He had only one field hit. The rest of his nearly 600 acres of crops was spared. And despite the hail damage, another part of the field was to produce about 40 bushels of oats per acre, just about the state average oats production. When the oats were ripe, Warren Krause used his old combine to shake the heads from the stalks. He figured he didn't get much, but he did it anyway.
Small grain in this area isn't real profitable to start with, and so if we get any excess, we will sell it. This year we won't have any excess. We put a little oats in the silo to stretch out our short hay supply, and so we'll just have basically enough oats to use in our dairy rations.
And after Farmer Krause had combined the oats, there was the straw left to use as bedding for the dairy cows. So all available hands turned out to bale straw.
It's a family operation, and the family, all the family members realize that they're an important cog in the operation.
It's dusty and it's dirty, but it's ours. So what if it's bad? It's just like your kids. You love them and you just go ahead and do it.
I've done it since 2nd grade. Most farm kids do. He pays me for the work I do. I don't need no more than is me.
All the Krause family work the farm at one time or another, and it amounts to more than just free labor. It's a part of growing, learning responsibility, an investment in something greater than each individual. And as summer neared its end, that investment would take the form of time, lots of it, in another race, a race to get the crops out.
Whenever harvest is here, you push this as hard as you can. And we start about 8:30 and run till about 5, and then from maybe 7:30, 8 to 11. So you're talking 14, 15 hours.
Yep, they're long hours. But when a farmer must get the silage cut, and he has 140 acres of beans waiting to be combined and 380 acres of corn to do after that, well, there's just no other way to get the work done.
We make silage as a roughage source for the dairy area. You need energy for making milk, and corn silage is a good source of energy. So no matter what the corn price is, we would still make corn silage because we need the roughage source.
When a farmer finishes blowing chopped corn into the silo, he needs to know just how full it is. Here on the Krause farm, the only way to do that is to climb up and check. Now, it's not that high, 50 feet is all, but it's the highest point on the farm. And the farm's atop a hill. Seems like a mile up there. And as he looks around, he realizes there's no time to enjoy the view. There's the bean field staring him right in the face. There are beans to combine. Before the bean harvest, Warren Krause had taken time to trade off his 8-year-old combine for a newer model. Not new, but not as old either.
I can clip a little shorter stubble and do a little better job of picking up the down beans than I could have done.
The investment in the newer combine meant that Warren Krause owns more than $250,000 worth of farm machinery. And with his 800 acres of land, he's worth more than $1 million. But that doesn't mean as much these days as it used to.
We're worth $1 million. We got $1 million invested. So if we looked at it the way industry looks at it, we should get a return on that investment of, say, 12%. Well, that'd be $120,000 a year on $1 million that we should get return on that investment, but we're not on top of what we get for our labor.
So Farmer Krause is a millionaire on paper. So he's still got to finish the beans. He still has 380 acres of corn waiting to be harvested. And there's always chores to do. Now, chores can be seen as a bother or a comfort. It's a bother to have to get up around 5:30 in the morning, weekdays, weekends, and holidays to milk the cows. But it's a kind of comfort to go through the routine of milking. It gets the day started. The milking operation is the backbone of the Krause farm. It provides the steady income, a check every month. And dairy is the focus when Farmer Krause thinks about how farmers have increased their efficiency when the rest of American society has lost it.
But that's one thing that the consumer better start realizing, is that American agriculture can only go so far with the cheap food policy we have now. When less than half the food dollar is actually going back for the raw material, there's something wrong with the whole chain. agriculture history to try to eliminate the middleman and try to gain a little more of the profit that each segment of the economy has to have.
So Farmer Krause milks his 40 cows a day, twice a day, every day, because the money is good. More important, it's a steady income. It was finally corn picking time, and the race with the weather was on. Farmer Krause felt he was behind, and the only way he could catch up was to unload on the run. Despite the hurry and the long days of harvest, it was a good time for Farmer Krause. You see, there was a lot more corn here than he'd expected.
We feel real fortunate in this area in that we'll be profiting by the drought to the other people, and that we're getting average or above average yields, and the price is fairly reasonable. And I guess we'll show a profit.
But this day, Farmer Krause was sorely tempted to forget his good fortune. He was in a hurry, and his combine kept breaking down.
We've had 2 bad days with breakdowns. I suppose we haven't had a total of 6-7 hours of picking in the last 2 days, and the rest of the time we spent fixing.
So when he'd blown out the fuel filter and replaced the sediment bowl, he really felt pressured to keep moving. And the pressure wasn't imaginary. Son Charles was running the stock chopper, and not many rows away, son-in-law Harry Holmberg was doing the plowing. They too were racing the weather.
I've seen the ground froze solid by the 1st of November, so we hurry as much as possible to get it done.
Normally, Farmer Krause would take 3,000 or 4,000 bushels a day out of the cornfield. Because of breakdowns, he hauled only 600 bushels up to the dryer. But he had to dry it just the same.
You'd take a terrific dockage if you didn't take the moisture out. And you couldn't store it either,
So he ran the 600 bushels through the corn dryer, and he was happy. 1980 was nearing a close, and the doubts of the growing season were past. Farmer Warren Krause had made it through this year of costs higher than ever before, this year of spring drought, this year of low prices from embargoed Russian grain markets. And Farmer Krause had done well.
I don't want any. It'll be hard to get people to serve a lot of the I got small pieces.